I'm Brianna Liestman, Managing Editor of Boating Industry. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Workforce Crisis. This webinar will be archived at boatingindustry.com/webinars after the presentation today. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Top 100 Leadership Alliance, the companies that support the Top 100 program, which recognizes the best boat dealers in North America. Wells Fargo Commercial Distribution Finance, Mannheim Specialty Auctions, Volvo Penta, Sunbrella Marine, Brunswick Dealer Advantage, the National Marine Manufacturers Association, and the Marine Retailers Association of the Americas. And there's still time to apply for this year's Top 100 at boatingindustry.com/top-100/application. Applications are due June 26th. It's no exaggeration to say that this workforce crisis may be the biggest challenge facing the boating industry right now. Affordability, expanding to new markets, and access issues are all important. But if there aren't enough people to build and service the boats and engines, none of the rest of that will matter. In this webinar on the workforce crisis, we'll share some of the key data and challenges facing the industry and a look at some of the creative solutions across the country to tackle the issue. We've got a great panel of speakers today who will share their data and best practices. Matt Gruhn, President of the Marine Retailers Association of the Americas, Neal Harrell, President of Brooks Marine Group, and Wendy J. Mackie, CEO of the Rhode Island Marine Trades Association and Composites Alliance. After they speak, we'll have time for a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of the webinar. Feel free to submit your questions throughout the session through the GoToMeeting module. Before we hand off to the panelists, I'm going to provide a little of our own data. As the boating industry has recovered over the last several years, dealers, manufacturers, and others are increasingly struggling to fill open positions. In our survey of boating industry readers last fall, 71% said they planned to add employees in 2017. 66% of boat and engine manufacturers were trying to add employees this year, while more than 70% of dealers said the same. At the same time, many of those companies reported difficulty in filling positions. In fact, in our survey, 96% of manufacturers reported trouble filling open manufacturing positions in 2016. For the dealers, the service department represented the most significant pain point, with 93% having difficulty filling those jobs. The struggle is not limited to the boating industry. When a large group of manufacturing CEOs met with President Trump in February, they said the problem is not one of jobs, but of training, saying students aren't coming out of school prepared for technical jobs. Government figures showed there were more than 324,000 open manufacturing jobs in February, which is 3 times as many as there were in 2009. Anecdotally, we have heard very similar stories from both dealers and manufacturers in the marine industry. Clearly, there's a skilled labor shortage, especially in the service and manufacturing sectors. The reasons are varied. The recession and resulting crash in boat sales had pushed many of these issues for dealers and manufacturers to the background, but the recovery means these challenges are returning. You can see more info on these topics and read several case studies from marine businesses who have come up with their own creative solutions in the April issue of Boating Industry, or online at boatingindustry.com/workforcecrisis. And now we're going to hear from our panelists, who will offer their insights on the workforce crisis and share some best practices. First, we'll hear from Matt Gruhn.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us, and thank you, Brianna, for the great introduction there. Some great statistics. If you want to go ahead and go to the first slide here. You know, as Brianna mentioned, we saw a big workforce crisis issue prior to the recession. Once the recession hit, unfortunately, we ended up losing about 35% of our dealerships between probably 2008, 2010 timeframe. And so the issue went away, and now that we're back into growth mode as an industry, we're having trouble filling those positions again. So as dealers started coming to us to talk to us a little bit about the issues that they're having, we wanted to put some data to it and develop a deeper understanding of what the issues actually look like. And so we launched a workforce assessment. This was a publication that we started creating in early 2016 when we did our research. And typically if we get 125 people to respond to a survey that we do, we feel like we're doing pretty well. We had over 530 people respond to the survey, so we knew right away that we had touched a nerve. What we learned from the results of that survey were pretty eye-opening for us. One of the first things was that we had over 21% of the positions that dealers had budgeted to have on their payroll. So these are positions that they expected to be able to fill, positions that they expected to be able to pay an employee for. 21% of those positions went unfilled. So that's a big number. When we're looking at dealerships, typically on average have around 15 positions on staff. We're looking at almost 4 positions, 3 to 4 positions that went unfilled. So it's a pretty significant number. 59% of those positions that were unfilled were related specifically to the service department, and 88% of those positions within the service department were specific to the technicians and the riggers. So I think those numbers match fairly closely with what Brianna shared there at the beginning of the webinar here. So we also asked the dealer respondents what their expectations were for filling positions going forward. And they expected to need an additional 6, it was 6.1, I believe, on average, employees by 2019. So we're a year and a half away from that now. We were short 3.8 employees. They were expecting to need 6.1. When we multiply that, basically 10 employees short by the 3,100 dealerships that we see out in the industry, we're looking and believing that we could see a shortage of 31,000 employees just at the dealership level in the marine industry over the course of the next year and a half or so. So big numbers, a big need for us here in the industry to fill these skilled labor positions specifically, but it was not exclusive to those positions either. There's a need all the way around. So we can go to the next slide, Brianna. What we saw from the positions that were being filled, dealers were reporting to us that 96.5% of the new recruits that they were hiring or bringing on board were categorized as either poorly or only partially prepared for the position, for the role. And another, I think, big factor here is that we saw dealers were spending on average on a per employee basis about $575 for training purposes, which again, I think it speaks to our need to do more to develop our own employees and do more for training purposes and so forth. And next slide. So the main takeaways that we had from this workforce assessment are here on this slide. First of all, we're seeing some significant generational gaps and challenges. We have this with every generation. I'm a Gen Xer. When I came into the workforce, our generation was known as the lazy generation. Today, it's the millennials that are the subject of conversation. But the disconnect that we have between the workforce, the more seasoned workforce, and the new people coming into the industry and into the workforce seems to be a little bit more, I guess the disconnect is a little bit more severe, maybe a little more challenging. So we saw a lot of responses to that within our survey written results, all of which included things like the sense of entitlement and wanting management level pay but not wanting to work hard and that sort of thing. All the stuff that we hear when it comes to the conversation there. Certainly not validating that on my part. I'm not suggesting that that's the reality, but we did see a lot of that coming out of the assessment results. We're also seeing a poor transition to and from schools. The expectation levels that we have as an industry, I think, need to be checked a little bit as far as we're expecting kids to come out of a technical school and be able to just jump right in and do all the work that we would expect a seasoned tech to do. And there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be a gap. At the same time, I think we've got students who are coming into the schools expecting, more pay, better hours, a different set of circumstances all the way around. And so we have to figure out not only the generational gap, but the transition from the schools as well. And then we do have a lack of schools to begin with. I know I just did a interview with a station in Madison, Wisconsin, and they were talking about the fact that there's only one technical school in the state of Wisconsin, and that's a huge boating state. And I think we see that issue around nationally is very prevalent. We all know that we deal with some serious seasonality of our businesses. Time of the year here in Minneapolis where, of course, the water's frozen and there's not a lot of boat activity and not a lot of additional service work. We see that all the way around, that we have seasonality for not just our dealers, but our manufacturers as well. We're seeing some issues with prioritizing training at the dealership level and developing employees. If that's, we just don't have the knowledge and understanding of how to develop those employees. If we're having trouble finding the sources for that training, I'm not sure on the specifics of that, but we heard a lot of that commentary from the dealers who responded to the survey. And then the compensation challenges. We believed, or at least the respondents believed, that we can't compete with other industries when it comes to paying our technicians, when we pay our employees. And the belief seemed to be that we're losing a lot of employees to the auto industry or the RV industry or something along those lines. And we just wanted to wrap our mind around that. So next slide here, Brianna. We launched, coming out of that, a compensation study. We worked with our sponsors there, ABYC and CDEC, to help us develop a deeper understanding of what's actually going on from a compensation standpoint at the dealership level. So we came up with a listing of 35 common positions. We worked with a third party to help us execute this, so we could tell dealers that you're not even telling MRAA what you're paying your employees. You're telling a third party that's going to aggregate everything for us. We felt like that the confidentiality of that was important, and I think it really helped us drive additional participation. But we had positions in every department within the dealership. We had management positions. We had service, sales, so on and so forth. We actually had 3 different levels of technician: an entry level, mid level, and then a high end master tech type position to help us kind of drill down into some of this. But the survey also dug into compensation ranges. So it wasn't just, what's the average, it was the 10th percentile, the 90th percentile, and so forth. It dug into commissions and bonuses. It dug into benefits information. And then we thought maybe we could derive some additional information if we asked about labor rates and see if there was any correlation between what the labor rates at a specific dealership are versus what they're paying their technicians. And so forth. So this compensation study we published late last year, and the results have been pretty well received. The survey assessment, or the survey itself, actually provides information in a written publication, like you see the cover of it here. Provides a pretty high level overview, drills down into some of the details. But then if you can click on that next slide, Brianna. It also allows you to get into a fully searchable dynamic salary calculator where you can punch in specific criteria such as the region you're located in, whether or not you're in a metropolitan or suburban area, rural area, whatever it might be, whether you have a marina, how many number of locations are in your organization, and so forth. And then you can break it down by any of those 35 job descriptions that I mentioned earlier. And you can see this sample here on the left-hand side is for a parts associate. We broke down my selections there in the middle of this page, the Midwest region. You can see that the average salary there at the 10th percentile was $18,800, all the way up to a $36,100 at the 90th percentile, and you can see kind of everything there in between as well. So the workforce assessment there with all of the data that I mentioned at the outset of this is all available at mraa.com/career center, as noted there. The salary survey is also available there. Provides a lot of good data, a lot of good insight. Both of those publications do. But if there's other information that you're looking for that I can assist with, you can certainly feel free to email me. It's real simple, just matt@mraa.com, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matt. Next, we are going to hear from Neal Harrell.
Thank you, Brianna, and thank you, Matt. There's some great data there, spot on in my opinion. And greetings to everyone participating in the webinar. I'm talking to you from sunny Newport, Rhode Island, where we're gearing up for another huge summer here. A lot of that has to do, of course, with the water and boats. And I've been a recruiter now for 19 years, and I've yet to see as a candidate-driven market, we call it, as I'm seeing today. Our average search pre-recession was taking us 4 to 8 weeks, and now we're looking at an average of 14 to 18 weeks to fill a position. And I'm in the business of recruiting, so it's a challenge. I want to share with you a little bit more on the landscape of talent, and then I want to get to perhaps some things you consider as solutions for some of the challenges we're seeing in workforce. Brianna, if you could advance the slide. So Matt talked a little bit about the generational gap, and right now in the workforce, we've got essentially 3 groups: baby boomers, the Gen X population, and Gen Y or millennials. And if you look at the data I've listed here, you can see that baby boomers are roughly between the ages of 53 to 71. So those are your seasoned techs, those are your senior managers, and those are the folks that are at or about retirement age in many cases. The Gen X, I'm a Gen Xer as well. There are far fewer of us than there are the baby boomers, and that's important just in terms of numbers, understanding the big picture. We're middle-level managers. We would be right to step into some of these senior positions as the baby boomers phase out. And then the largest group, 83 million millennials, and these are folks who are now entering the workforce or have entered the workforce, I'd say, in the last 10, 12 years, and are hopefully rising to the ranks of middle management before too long, yet they're not ready to slide into some of those senior level positions, master techs, et cetera, being vacated by the boomers. So that's one piece of data, just the pure numbers of it all. The other is that, as a society, sometime in the 1980s and 1990s, we decided that school curriculum, particularly at the high school level, was going to be centric towards college prep, and we did away with a lot of our trades curriculum. It was a very real thing. So my generation, for example, was not exposed to careers, fulfilling careers in the trades. I think certainly adding to this workforce crisis is that good people are generally employed. And right now they're feeling secure because things are good, and therefore they're risk adverse. And therefore they're not doing things like perusing job boards looking for the next opportunity. Everybody's sort of hunkered down in this type of economy. And again, top talent as a general rule is generally employed. They've got employer loyalty as well. That company that stuck with them through the recession, they feel loyal to. The housing market is recovering, but that was an issue certainly in the last couple of years. Folks were still trying to dig out from lost equity on the house and just couldn't move. And more so than ever, we're seeing dual income winners. So both spouses are working, and the spouse's career and income is part of the equation as well. If you could slide it, please. So, I tell companies that if you want to be good at sourcing talent for your organizations, you have to always be recruiting. You can't be in a reactive mode where all of a sudden now you've got an opening and you got to figure out how to fill it. And I understand that's going to happen. Unexpected things are going to happen. But a lot of this, we're going to talk in a little bit about succession planning. And I think our industry as a whole has done a pretty poor job of succession planning and seeing some of this coming, not 6 months out, but 12 to 18 months, maybe even a couple of years out. So we have to get into the mindset that we're always looking for top talent, not just when a position is open. And that message needs to be communicated from the CEO down to your frontline supervisors and even trades level workforce. We've got to do a better job of holding on to high performers. Matt discussed that as well, losing talent to other industries, for example, and ways we can do that. We could spend a whole webinar on that topic alone, but I'd say communicating with your people is probably the best way to start towards retaining your high performers. You have to make tough decisions as business leaders to replace or fix marginal performers. And if there's anything I want to leave with you today in terms of taking a proactive role in sourcing talent for your organizations, it's to get into a hunting mode, not a trapping mode. And what I mean by that is when you post a job on a job board, in the headhunting world, we call that trapping. We set the bait, we hope the right person sees it, applies, and that they're qualified. And certainly that needs to be a tool in your recruitment toolbox. But what I want to charge managers and hiring authorities and certainly human resources professionals with is going out there and hunting for talent, using today's tools and technology to go out there and identify and then reach out to potential talent for your organization. If you could advance the slide, Brianna, thank you. So as you do that, one of the first things that we talk to clients about is understanding their brand. The first step in our search process with clients is what we call a needs analysis profile. We want to talk to the decision makers, hiring authorities about what's compelling enough about this position or this company that somebody might consider leaving their current job to come join you. All right. And so you need to understand, this is a great morning meeting exercise, by the way, is to ask that to your frontline managers, ask that same question. What makes us unique, different? What makes us better? But I read an article or a publication many years ago called The War for Talent, and they identified 4 basic recruiting messages that the best people tend to respond to. And it can be the go with the winner, that's the GEs of the world, the best. The big risk, big reward, that's the startup. Save the world, we're seeing a lot of this right now in clean energy and solar and so forth. And then there's the lifestyle message. Those people that get excited about a product or a location. And certainly I think this 4th recruiting message, the lifestyle, absolutely speaks to our industry. All of us ought to be incorporating that in our message. We're selling boats, we're selling recreation, we're selling the water, and we need to sell that sizzle, particularly to young people as they might consider coming into our industry. All of you may have other components. If you're if you're Marine Max, your message is also go with a winner. If you're a startup, then maybe you're number 2, big risk, big reward. But those are generally the messages that talent responds to, and you need to brand yourself that way. Next slide, please. So here's a position profile. This is step 2 in our search process. We want to create what we call a position profile. And basically it's a narrative that both explains the attributes and perhaps the accomplishments of the company. And then the second half of the document typically talks about the position. And that might include duties and responsibilities and reporting schemes and challenges and priorities and so forth. I'm certainly not going to read you this. This is one we did for Monterey a few months ago, but it needs to tell a story. And that story ought to answer the question, why would I leave what I'm doing now to perhaps consider an opportunity at Monterey or whatever your company may be? Again, another interesting morning meeting exercise. We use words that sell across the document. So we talk about Williston, Florida, ranked as the #1 place to live in North America. We talk a little bit about Gainesville. You know, relocation is the #1 reason someone will or will not pursue a new opportunity. So if they're not in your backyard and you're looking to source candidates from other states or other regions, think about including some information about your area in this position description. And this is what you're going to use for posting purposes. And this is what you might use if you do a Facebook post or a LinkedIn message. But what I see a lot of are what I call position requisitions. Okay. You know, must have this, must require. It's very bland and it's not attractive and people just don't respond to them. Next, please. To be proactive, to hunt, you got to have some partners, and you really need to have some local, regional, and national schools that you can source talent from, and you need to have very strong relations with them. And with most schools, what you're going to hear is, yeah, send us the posting and we'll post it. I'm going to encourage you to take a lot more of a proactive approach. If it's a local school, go see them. More so, go invite their students to come to your facility, to your boatyard, to your marina, and tour the place. Gain relationships with not just their career services office, but their instructors, the guys and gals that are on the floor teaching these students. They know best who their top talent is. Consider internships and consider apprenticeships. Wendy Mackie, who's going to speak next, can shed a lot of light on that. We've had a tremendously successful apprenticeship program administered by our Rhode Island Marine Trades Association. And so you got to invest in that. And again, open your doors, invite people in, let them get around the boats, let them get around the waterfront. Next slide, please. Spread the word. Use technology to help spread that brand that you created. LinkedIn is a gold mine for talent. Facebook is certainly a great way to broadcast the message that you may have an opening. And a little trick of the trade, a recruiter's secret, Craigslist is a wonderful way to post jobs because A, it's very cheap, and B, it's generally only going to source local candidates because that's how you search on Craigslist. Perhaps that's a posting tool for you there. Next slide. Most of you have what you might refer to as an employee referral program. I would argue that most of those programs are dormant, meaning you've told your people if they refer somebody and that person comes to work for you and you hire them, maybe after 6 months, you'll give them a $100 bonus or something. What your people hear in that is that if I hear of anybody who's looking and I refer them, then I will, and they get hired, then I'll get $100 if they stick around for 6 months. So your people are thinking about who's looking and not who's talented. So you need to go back to your people and solicit names from them. And all the marine electricians know all the marine electricians, and all the carpenters know all the carpenters. So use a proactive employee referral program to solicit leads for talent. Next slide, please. And then I'll just end with some best practices. Again, you got to know yourself as an organization. Have your people help define that. We ask the question, what brought you to the company, Mr. Hiring Authority? And it may be location, it may be product, it may be the manager they work for, it may be the area. So you need to understand that. Engage and empower and hold accountable your HR teams. And if you're not big enough to have a dedicated HR department, then who's responsible for that role? Who's responsible for helping the administrative side of hiring? And you have to engage those people. You have to empower them, and you certainly have to hold them accountable. We talked about embracing technology as a recruitment tool. How many of you have a contact management software that you use? Most of you probably. Could part of that be dedicated to the HR file? So if we identify a marine technician on a LinkedIn search that we do, we might want to reach out to, can we file that information away for one day? Certainly, we have to do a better job of growing our own. We've got to invest in young talent. I understand it's a long-term solution, but like Matt talked about, we're running out of people in droves, and we have to do this as an industry. Create a recruiting process. What is your internal process? And you got to stick to it. And if you want to keep good people, then recognize good people. Recognize them through pay increases, through establishing career ladders for them. But peer recognition is a great way to hold on to high performers. Let it be known that you have individuals that are doing a great job for your organization, and share that message with your other employees. Thank you for your time, and I'll stand by for questions at the end.
Thank you, Neal. Next, we are going to hear from Wendy.
Thank you, Brianna. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for asking me to be a part of this webinar. It's very exciting that we can talk about the things that need to be done or could be done in your area. I do come to this webinar from a trade association mindset, so everything I say will come from that perspective, but I think that you'll get the points I'm going to try to make. RIMTA, Rhode Island Marine Trades Association, has been working to address the workforce crisis for about 10 years now, creating, oh, I'm sorry, Brianna, can you put the next slide on? We've been working to address the workforce crisis for about 10 years now, creating and implementing stage and age appropriate skill training, as well as the marketing and public relations campaigns that go along with them in order to meet the demands of our local industry employers. During my presentation, I'd like to share an overview of some of those programs that we run regularly, and then highlight some areas where you can begin to create solutions in your own region and state. Slide. RIMTA approaches workforce development holistically, and by that I mean that we think about all of the needs of the employer when we're creating a solution. So when we set out to create a worker pipeline for the recreational boating industry in Rhode Island, we envisioned that what the entire workforce continuum would look like, and what the additional support services would be needed would be needed as the employee continued to climb up the career ladder. We settled on these three focus areas, from career exposure and engagement for middle and high school age students, to skill building and job placement for entry-level workers, and then on to ongoing training for the existing workforce to stay relevant and competitive. I'll go into a little more detail on specific programs in the next few slides and give you a taste of what we've done. But there are so many more details available for you if and when you're ready to start your own initiatives. Slide. Greenhouses. We use this term to describe any activity that's going on, that's basically growing the workforce of the future. Whether it's class field trips to local boat shows, a captain speaking about his duties on a charter yacht, or a group of teachers touring a boatyard, everyone on this webinar today understands the importance of getting people out on the water or into a boat shop to best understand what our industry is made of. We at RIMTA spend a lot of time thinking about the language and hands-on demonstrations we use to describe the career opportunities in our industry, and the message is best received when you can speak about the industry and show an example at the same time. Slide. Short-term exposure programs also fall under our greenhouse heading. RIMTA coordinates several short-term programs throughout the year for middle and high school students, as well as out-of-school youth. These programs include after-school programs, vacation camps, and summer work boat building programs. The goal of these programs is to immerse young people in engaging project-based learning that teaches them tool handling, terminology, teamwork, and work readiness skills. Another goal of these exposure programs is to get these young people out on the water, many times in the boat they've just built themselves. The pictures shown here include a middle school student at a one-week vacation camp building a sailboat model, and on the right, two high school students building a 14-foot Bevan skiff in a 6-week summer work program. These programs are examples of easier ways to begin building a workforce development pipeline and to partner with local post-secondary schools, high schools, and employers. And as a bonus, these types of programs are typically pretty easy to get grant funding for, too. Slide. Short-term training programs provide the opportunity for new workers or career changers to get their hands dirty, to understand the culture and environment of the industry, and to get employers involved in the actual workforce training and hiring. And our industry in Rhode Island offers several attractive things to the general labor market. These include year-round employment, paying livable wages, a lifestyle career in an indoor-outdoor environment, and on-the-job training with career advancement. RIMS's short-term training programs for new and entry-level workers highlight these attractive career qualities while teaching the basics of tool handling, safety, terminology, and team dynamics. Graduates will not be an expert in anything necessarily, but they will be ready to work, take direction, and learn the ways of particular businesses that they're hired to work for. About half of the training takes place at an actual employer location with an active industry professional, and the other half is spent with industry-specific trainers from post-secondary institutions. In Rhode Island, that includes IRIS, New England Tech, MTTI, and Confident Captain. Slide. This is an outline of our pre-apprenticeship training program. We call it PAT for short, and we call the trainees PATs, as in Patriots, that great football team who represents New England. This specific program outline is from our combined marine trades and composites version of the program. The model was thoughtfully designed to be flexible with its content depending on the current employer demand for workers. The workforce development buzzword for that is industry-driven to describe this type of program. It simply means that before we run a program, we inventory the jobs that are either currently open or expected to be open in the next couple of months to decide the skill-building content we include in the training. So for example, if there's a significant demand from the sail-making and upholstery sector of the industry, we may reduce the time spent in, say, composites and add sail-making and textile components. Likewise, if the majority of the job demand is in boat building and composites, we might swap out winterization and commissioning in favor of additional manufacturing skill building. Important components of this program that are critical areas to replicate for success include ongoing case management of the, oddly, of the employer and of the trainee, ongoing industry involvement, especially in the interview and assessment processes, as well as constant immersive exposure to workplace culture and environment. You need to let them know what they're getting into so that they can be successful. Slide. Our PAT program has job placement rate of about 90% and even higher graduation rate, as you can see. This is because we train to place, which just means that the interview and assessment process for acceptance into the program is competitive, and we only take into the program those people who we feel confident will be employable after the 7 weeks. There are a few reasons for this, but the most important one is making sure that we do not place someone with an employer that will cause more harm than good for the employer, thereby ruining the trust that we have built with the employer, and it just doesn't work anymore. Because the majority of the employers we work with in Rhode Island are small and lack human resource departments, our recruiting and screening process is one of the most valuable components. To ensure that our relationships with employers remain strong, we check in on the new hires periodically to see if additional support is required. We keep our cohort size pretty small for all of our training programs, usually about 10 per training. And we typically run the program just before key hiring times in the industry, so early spring and late summer. We always try to couple our training programs with state and federal employer incentives and training grants, such as on-the-job training. This not only reduces the risks associated with hiring a new worker who requires additional training, but it also provides monetary incentives for employers to grow and train their own workforce. Slide. The PAT program has been effective at getting competitors working together toward a common goal. Creating the workforce needed to position Rhode Island as a worldwide leader in the marine industry. This slide depicts the volume and variety of employers and training providers that are involved in our pre-apprenticeship training program. The partnership grows each time we run the program. And I think it's important that you know, when we first started this program in 2013, we only had 3 employers involved. As our program became more refined from employer feedback and word began to spread among employers, so did our employer base. Slide. So now back to this slide. As we start to think about how to address the workforce crisis in our own states or regions, I encourage you to think about where your most critical need is, where you have the most passion, or at what point would be easiest to get something started in your region. Click, Brianna. Entry-level training, such as RIMTA's PAT program, requires assistance of a workforce development professional and potentially some grant funding. But it is an effective solution to the workforce shortage and will provide a fair amount of positive attention for your industry from government officials and funders. Placing or underemployed workers in full-time jobs with livable wages is like music to the political ear. So there are definitely additional benefits. Click. Greenhouses are an easy way for everyone to get involved in cultivating the workforce of the future. These are usually low or no cost. Because it's connected to workforce development and employers are involved, there's usually grant funds readily available for this kind of stuff. Partnering with nonprofits that work with youth is a great place to begin, as they know how to get grants and they already are connected to the target population. Career tech schools, high schools, middle schools also make good partners, but building relationships can be a little more difficult if you don't have an inside track on that. Click. If you run a Marine Trades Association or belong to one, and you should belong to one, you are probably already participating in professional development opportunities. I would suggest that you call your local workforce investment board to find out if there are grant programs available that can offset the cost of more structured incumbent worker training or employer-specific customized training to fill existing job openings. Click. So this slide is just a shout out to my good friend Susan Zellers, who runs the Maryland Marine Trades Association, and the great work she's been doing for the last few years to implement training and workforce cultivation programs for the industry there. This outline was actually created as a simple guideline to show the path that RIMTA took when it first started getting involved in building the capacity of the association and layering it with workforce development programming. Now, this is not the end-all, be-all for any group, including Maryland, but I wanted you to see that starting a workforce continuum is a cumulative process. You have to start somewhere and then build as time, talent, and resources allow. The motto in my office is start with the lowest hanging fruit, where the light bulb is already switched on and where you're most likely to find success. There's really a great deal of money available to address the workforce crisis. It's just a matter of knowing how and where to tap into it. You can search for your workforce investment board at www.servicelocator.org or just by Googling locate a local investment board, a workforce investment board. And Brianna's going to post that link afterward. That is slide. This is my contact information. I am happy to answer any questions now on the telephone, on this webinar, or anytime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you to all of our panelists. Now we've got some time to take your questions. Remember that you can submit those right there on your screen through the GoToMeeting module. Well, I'd like to get us started off with one question. We went through a lot of really great data today, and there's a lot of really great information about building and developing a workforce, but I'm wondering what you would recommend a company do. Anyone on the panel can answer this. What would you recommend a company do in the short term to overcome some of the challenges that we're facing today with the workforce crisis?
Brianna, this is Matt. I think we get that question a lot here. I think the most significant thing that we see dealers doing today is getting in touch with their local technical school, if they have one. Some of our dealer members are on the board of a regional school. Some of them are interacting with the lead instructors and so forth at those schools. And what we're finding is that more often than not, the students who are coming out of those schools have a job in place 6 to 8 months before they're even graduated. So getting in early, having conversations with those schools and playing a part there in some way, I think is really important for them to kind of stay ahead of the curve.
I'll speak to that as well. Short term, I think organizations could probably do a little better job looking across their incumbent workforce to perhaps train cross-functionally, and that's a great thought in that, we may see a downturn, and if and when we do, it's nice to have that individual who could possibly cover for you in a couple of areas, and or should you lose someone or gain a lot of business in a particular area. And let's talk about the painter who's also a fiberglass repair technician, or the mechanic who's also an electronics guru. So, promoting from within or growing your people or training and developing your people speaks across the organization as to your commitment to your people. So short term, I'd look at your incumbent workforce. Do we have someone on staff who could possibly do this? And then I would agree with Matt. Go out and look at your local and your regional and even national trade schools. Who's training the types of individuals you may be looking for? Engage them, as Matt said, early. My office sits on the campus of the Iris School of Trades and Technology, which has basically 3 boat building programs. And these students are hired usually 3 to 6 months before they graduate. And so there is absolute demand for them. And I think we need to have very strong relations with career services professionals, instructors, and guidance counselors from these types of institutions.
And this is Wendy. I'll just add to that. Just again, I wear an association hat, so I typically will come to the table with that mindset. But I would say also reach out to your local Marine Trade Association and let them know, and any other employers that you are aware of that are in. Let the association know. Part of the association's job is to lobby, and they can be a one voice for multiple employers. So if an association in your area goes to the State Department of Labor or to the Workforce Investment Board or even to the governor's office or whomever is the right person to go to, you're bringing jobs to the table. You're saying we have X number open. And that really resonates in their ears to find money to put towards that to find a solution. So I would definitely say aggregate that information in your area and bring that to the state in some way.
Wonderful. We've got a few more questions here. This next one I think would probably be best answered by Wendy, but if anyone else wants to jump in on it, feel free. And that is, what federal support do you see as necessary in transposing programs like RMTAs to other areas of the nation?
Well, what federal support do I see as a need? Is that what the question is?
Yes, as necessary for transposing those programs to other areas.
Well, so there actually is funding available in some areas. Federal funding available that feeds down locally to the states and the workforce investment boards. That's more for like one-off solutions. It does fund what we do for our pre-apprenticeship training program. But if we're talking about a national solution with one federal grant that comes down and does that, I don't actually know that we're going to have any clear picture on funding in the next little while. But there are grants out there right now that are being implemented. For example, there's one in Rhode Island called Apprenticeship Rhode Island, and that was federal funds that came down to support a collaborative effort to replicate the apprenticeship model in non-traditional occupations. So the Rhode Island Marine Trade Association signed in on that coalition and is trying to develop and push out apprenticeship programs here in Rhode Island. Did that answer it?
And I would speak to that too. We just heard yesterday out of the current administration their commitment to reigniting a federal U.S. apprenticeship model. I think that will be handed to the states for implementation. So I would certainly, every state has a apprenticeship board, if you will, and reaching out maybe as a trade association to that group, I think would be timely.
Great, and it looks like we got a comment from one of our other attendees who mentioned that the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Grant is grant funding that is awarded from the U.S. government to the states and then allocated to various schools in case the person who asked the question originally has any other details they need. One thing I want to remember to bring up to attendees is that if you are looking for the slides today for the PowerPoint presentation, when you go to boatingindustry.com/webinars for the archive of the webinar, we will have a link for you to download the slides at that time. So if you'd like to have any of these resources available, check back with us in about 24 hours and that should be available for you at that time. One other question we got is if anyone on the panel knows of any companies that have created a successful in-house apprenticeship program, and if you could talk about those.
On the dealer side, there's a somewhat of an apprenticeship program at Seattle Boat Company. Seattle Boat Company has been recognized several times, I know, through Brianna in the top 100 and so forth. They've got a master technician that they put together with an apprentice, and then they've got a really nice program wrapped around how both the apprentice and the master technician kind of develop and work together and pay plans and all of that sort of thing. So I know of that on the dealer side.
Yeah, and let's be clear that there's two types of apprenticeships. There's the one that might be instituted and managed by an independent company or perhaps even a trade association. And then there's the U.S. Department of Labor's officially recognized apprenticeship program. And at REMTA, Wendy helped me out here, but at REMTA, I think that ours is a little bit of a hybrid, that we've taken components of the Department of Labor's model, and this is why we refer to it as pre-apprentice as opposed to apprenticeship. But we've taken components of that model and used it as guidelines across the state and across our industry to roll out the pre-apprenticeship program.
And I'll add to that. That was good, Neal. We are actually trying to roll out apprenticeship as well. However, we have had a significant amount of resistance from employers in the industry that we're working with to actually get it off the ground. I think apprenticeship is an awesome model and really can help our industry in the sense that it allows you to continue to learn on the job. And that's what we, at least in Rhode Island, that's a lot of what we do here is train while they're on the job. So apprenticeship lends itself to that. What we have done with the pre-apprenticeship training program, I've been told that you can't call it a pre-apprenticeship training program unless you have an apprenticeship. And so we do actually have one apprenticeship right now with U.S. Watercraft, and it's a boat builder's apprenticeship. So we are able to call our program a pre-apprenticeship training. But also we have made it so that all of the hours that somebody spends in our pre-apprenticeship training program aligns and articulates with the apprenticeship. So they will get credit for all of the hours as quote unquote classroom time towards their apprenticeship.
Yeah, and it's a model that's worked. It's a model that's hard to get going because you need collaboration. We're fortunate in Rhode Island in that we're small, so we can collaborate easier. I think a lot of this has to be done at the grassroots level. You know, you got to get to know your local high schools and trade schools. You've got to know your brand and your messaging and get that to potential workers. You know, one of the things that we see employers doing, and it's paying off for them now, is establishing relationships with high school kids, for example, but looking at soft skills far more than hard skills. We can teach the hard skills. We can teach them how to turn a wrench. We can teach them how to repair fiberglass. But that individual who's got strong work ethic, who's dependable, who's going to stick with us, that's the future of your workforce. And we've all met young people around our communities who fit that profile. And so I would tell you that to look for that first, soft skills first, perhaps that individual that likes working with their hands or loves boats and spends time by the water, and may not be college bound and might consider a position in the trades and grow them into your organization that way.
I can't agree with you more, Neal. Thank you. In our pre-apprenticeship training program, we do, we get people familiar and comfortable with the industry, the terminology, the different things that they'll experience within the industry. But we really are focusing on making sure that they show up on time, that they understand the culture and the environment, so that they can, when they get to work, they're fitting in already. They're open to receiving more direction. I agree with you, Neal.
We've got time for just a couple more questions. One question we just got in, an attendee said they were glad Neal brought up the tell your story, sell your story, as they think this is a key part of getting the word out about the passion the boating industry has. With a national workforce development focus, What do the panelists think about the idea of creating a boating industry story channel on YouTube and allowing everyone involved in this initiative post videos to this station to best get the word out about our workforce development issues? And I would add to that, is there any national program that we can put together to really sell the boating industry at large as an employer to the population?
Yeah, I think a couple of great points and questions there. One of the things that I'll note is that when we were at the American Boating Congress here earlier, back I guess last month, the MRAA board and the NMMA board of directors got together to talk about this topic and want to put a focus on building some sort of a national united effort on the workforce challenges that we're faced with. We're in the early stages of that. I don't have any details that I can share at this point, but I think we're all of the understanding that we need to come together as an industry and be able to tell that story and sell careers in the industry. I mean, you go back to Wendy's first slide there on her presentation with the dock and the row of cubicles, and I think that's just the greatest illustration of the story that we can tell as an industry. That choose your office. Would you rather work in a row of cubicles, or would you rather work in the boating industry, near the water, on the water, whatever it might be? And so we do need to come together, and I would just suggest that we're going to be able to roll out some thoughts and ideas and maybe hopefully some details on some of those efforts here hopefully very soon.
Matt, just regarding that slide, thanks for noticing and remembering the logo or the tagline on it. I just want to point out that slide was actually created by a millennial to attract millennials to the industry. And I think that's a place that we can also be really learning and looking. If somebody, the YouTube channel with Story Channel, I think that's great. I wonder how it would be organized. I'm not a YouTube person, so I don't know the answer to that. But I think my point is actually that we need to be talking to that population who we want to be attracting to figure out what attracts them. If it's the YouTube Story Channel, let's go forward with that. Whatever it is, we need to be definitely reaching out to that group of people and asking them.
I agree fully. Many years ago, the Marine Industries Association of South Florida put together, at the time it was a CD, and we took it to local high schools and trade schools and would get up and do a talk and have a slideshow. And there's a lot of really great content, certainly as an industry, that we could present. I mean, imagine that photo library we've got of boats and marinas and the water and the lifestyle. But I think a big component too is getting the people to your facilities, getting them on and around the water, getting them on and around boats is a giant part of it. So I think it's a two-pronged approach, where there needs to be a roadmap, and maybe this is an NMMA, MRAA kind of at the macro level initiative. But I still think somebody's got to be tasked with boots on the ground, going out there and forging relationships with the schools and with the institutions from which your future of your workforce may come, and getting them out to your places of business and helping them understand the environment, the lifestyle, the product, and the type of careers that might be available to them.
And, to that point, Neal, I just want to say, like Rhode Island Marine Trade Association, our association has become that liaison, that middle person to match people up with employers and activities up with environments and all of that sort of thing. And, it's done a lot of good for our association. It's actually built the capacity of our association and increased the impact for both our industry locally, but also raised our profile nationally and internationally. And I really think that workforce development can do that for other associations. So I would encourage any employer that's on the phone now or on the webinar, or associations that are on the webinar, to please start talking to each other about this. I am happy to give anybody a phone call worth of advice and direction, to point you where to go, how to get this started. Tons and tons of slides I have to help figure out your way. I just think it's a smart way to go.
Wonderful. And it looks like we are unfortunately out of time and not able to get to everyone's questions, but I want to make sure that we do address them after the call. So if you have a question that wasn't answered, or you think of one after the call that you may not have thought of right now, please email me at bliestman@boatingindustry.com. I'll pass those questions along to our panelists to make sure we get an answer to you ASAP. You can also reach out to any of our panelists individually if you have a question specifically for one of them. On behalf of Boating Industry and the Top 100 Leadership Alliance, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you to our panel for some great insights into tackling the workforce crisis. This webinar will be archived on our website at boatingindustry.com/webinars, and the slides will be available for download there as well. Thank you and have a great day, everyone.